Okay, my outstanding friends, get ready. This is going to be a shocker du jour from down under. Where are we? Well, we're down in Australia, down under. What is this? Well, that, my friends, is rivers of blood. As I've always said, Australia is literally almost like a gigantic blob of blood, a scab. All of that is red blood running from somewhere for some reason. I don't know. We know we're Mudfossil people. We understand the abrupt transitions. We understand all the colors. We understand this is not standard biology, just accidentally things crushing and changing colors. And this is what happens in biology. Now, exactly where this biology is and what kind of creature it was, it appears to be dragonish. There's dragon scales all over the place. I mean, and you can see, the transitions are just undeniable. And this is the way they do. They have all different types of transition metals in there that change the chemistry for whatever reason. Membranes do that. There's a layer of this and then another layer of that and another layer of this, and apparently those are like filters to between whatever in between. But this is not your average hills and valleys. Now this is in Australia. Now we're going to be looking at, I believe it's called Smoking Mountains. It's up in this area, and I'm going to show you in a second. And a good friend of mine, Steve Lindsay, sent me this and said, what do you think? And I said, well, let me take a look, and that's what we're going to do, take a look. Steve, always a pleasure. Thank you, my good friend. So my good friend Steve Lindsay sends me this and says, what do you think about this? And they're talking about this burning mountains. They say it has been burning for 6,000 years. The fire's movement beneath the surface causes subsidence where it collapses, forming deep cracks, fissures, and release wisps of steams and sulfurous, remember that, very important, sulfurous smoke into the air. Why the sulfur? Let's take a look at the video real quickly, and then I will explain why this is happening. Now, this is from a place called Oz Geology. It's about Australia, and this mountain has been burning for over 6,000 years. I'm not trying to steal it as a content. I just want to comment on what their assessment of this is, and I will give you mine. So here we go, and here we go.
In a quiet corner of New South Wales, Australia, a hill perpetually smoulders from within. What looks like an unassuming rise in the landscape hides a remarkable secret beneath its surface. A coal seam burning continuously for millennia. Wisps of sulphurous smoke curl from fissures in the ground, and the earth underfoot grows warm. Hints of an ancient fire that refuses to die. This is Burning Mountain, known to the local Wanneroo people as Wingen, meaning fire. In the grand measured voice of time, we embark on a journey through the epic story of this ever-burning mountain, a slow drama unfolding across epochs. Don't forget to click on that subscribe button, hit the bell icon, and like this video, as it's the best way to support this channel. And if you enjoy it, consider sharing it around.
And mine too.
To understand Burning Mountain's origin, we must travel back nearly 250 million years, into the late Permian period.
All right, now here's where we're probably going to differ in our assessment of what he's looking at. Because I showed you, well, in the video it shows, right here. I understand what's going on here and why the sulfur is coming out of here and what the patterns in these rocks are and why these specific cracks and fissures occur in certain rhythmic patterns. This is, I can explain this, but you have to be able to understand all of these different things because they all mean something. What's the chemistry? What's the structure of the things? You know, what's the heat? What's going on with the heat? That's very important to understand the heat and how it affects the different types of chemistry that's here. When you add heat to something, it causes it to change its molecular structure a lot of times. And that's what's happening here. That's why we're getting that sulfur. Okay, back to seeing what he has to say about this. Now, and he's saying consider sharing it around. Yes, and my stuff too. And here it goes. Let's listen to what he has to say.
To understand Burning Mountain's origin, we must travel back nearly 250 million years, into the late Permian period. At that time, this region was not dry bushland, but a vast swampy forest, at the edge of an ancient coastline. Great rivers once coursed here, depositing silt and sand into a lush delta. Towering tree ferns, primitive pines, and giant horsetail plants thrived in the waterlogged earth, living and dying in endless cycles. Over countless generations, their thick layers of dead plant matter were buried in mud and lacking oxygen, slowly compressing into peat and, with deeper burial and time, transforming into coal. By the end of the Permian, a seam of coal several meters thick lay entombed under sediments.
All right, let's talk about this. Okay, I'm going to tell you right now, that is a vein, literally a vein in a creature's body where the black used blood would return to the heart to be reprocessed. This is the capillaries. You see all these little spots going in and out of there? That's where the blood normally would feed into the vein and then it would go back. They're up here too. Up here is eroded off because it's way up the top and eroding over the top. This is eroding as like a wall going in. This has been eroding over the top, and the red blood runs off. That's red blood stays fluid. It stays fluid virtually forever. All you got to do is rehydrate it, and it turns wet again, and turns red, and it flows. You see that? That's red blood, and it's running out from that area where it normally would run into the vein. Capillaries run into the vein picks up the black, and it just takes it back to the heart. That's what you're seeing there. That is not just a seam of coal, which it is, but it's not just some kind of geological formation. That was from the creature's body, and when it died, the blood, this particular type of blood, which is the FeO2 style, which has less oxygen, turns into the black coal. And there's a complete separation between the black and the red. They don't mix together. That's why you don't see them mixing together. There's a polarity change there. It's called iron banding. This is one type of iron, that's the other. This is magnetite, that's hematite. And they break apart. Okay, so here's what their conclusion is that this mat of stuff, which was all this forest stuff, swampy stuff, created this layer of peat, which turned into coal. Now, I don't discount that line of thought, but it's just not the case. This is biology of a creature, and that is the vein in a creature's body, which turns to coal. This is the red blood which runs off. All right, so here we go.
The Permian, a seam of coal several meters thick lay entombed under sediments, the preserved bounty of that primordial swamp. The Earth did not remain still after the Permian. Over the tens of...
All right, let's just look at this quickly from this shot. This is a vein. Now, it would have come across here and continued on. Veins are porous. Believe it or not, they're porous. This was probably where a bunch of lymph worked its way in. And because there's like areas where they're real porous and they have valves and all kinds of stuff. But something happened here. This is structural. And this is the cavity of a creature's body. And that's vein. Now, they're not perfectly a perfect tube. The arteries are. Arteries are a perfect tube until they branch off. Veins are scruffy, and I'll show you this. Well, I'm going to show it to you right now. This same structure. All right, their interpretation was that all that stuff piled up from the debris of this rotting stuff in the swamp and created this mat. Now, I want you to look at the abrupt transitions. I want you to look at the black, which is the vein blood, versus the red, which is the red fluidy, floppy blood, which runs off, which it is. It's running out of there. Normally it would run in. These are capillaries. And at the capillaries, they feed into the vein. Now, I'm going to just keep playing it and see what he has to say here. Here goes.
By the end of the Permian, a seam of coal several meters thick lay entombed under sediments, the preserved bounty of that primordial swamp. The Earth did not remain still after the Permian. Over the tens of millions of years that followed, tectonic forces gently folded and uplifted the strata in this region. Layers of rock that once lay flat were tilted and raised as Australia's landmass shifted. In the upper Hunter Valley, younger rock layers that had blanketed the area, sands and clays from the Triassic period above, were
sands and clays from the Triassic period. Remember, that's important. That was from the Great Flood. Sands and clays from the Triassic.
Gradually worn away by erosion. Wind, rain, and time chiseled the landscape.
All right, you guys know what that is. It's muscle. Those are layers of tissue.
Exposing the ancient Permian coal bed that had been buried deep underground. What was once a subterranean sea.
That's the red blood, and that's the black blood. The red blood is running out. It stays fluid. The black turns hard. And that no question about it. I have it right here in my shop, same thing. The black stays red, hard and just gnarly, and it's called magnetite, and the red is hematite, and it just runs right out. It always stays fluid.
Secret eventually reached the surface in places, peeking out of hillsides and creek banks as dark.
Hold on 1 second. All right. This is red blood, and its services, it was at one time, I would say, these were all capillaries feeding the black vein. And now that the guy died, or whatever it was, where it was normally going this way, it's running out. So that's why you see it like this. And I'm sure it runs out to this very day. It looks like it's still wet and running out right now. Now, I have a theory that Australia was quite likely the South Pole. And that's why it stayed so red and bloody, because everything there would have been frozen very, would have been in a normal state of freezing. And it would have preserved probably better than most other places on Earth, or it wasn't impacted as seriously, or something happened there. The biology there did not change drastically. It's just a gigantic red scab. It's just nothing but blood. And that's why all these opals and all that stuff are so fabulous, because all the transition metals are still within the blood, because the blood never left. For some reason, the blood is still there. So to me, it would have been frozen, like you're frozen a big chunk of meat, and now it's thawed out, and we got this stuff. All right, back to the channel. Here we go.
Dark outcrops of coal. By the time humans first walked these lands, the coal seam at Mount Wingen lay close enough to the open air that only a thin layer of soil and rock kept it hidden. The stage was set for an extraordinary ignition. No one knows exactly when the fire in Burning Mountain began. It started long before any written record, perhaps thousands or even tens of thousands of years ago. And how does a mountain catch fire? Scientists have pondered this mystery, and several theories have emerged. One possibility is a lightning strike or bushfire in ages past. A stroke of lightning or a wildfire could have ignited an exposed piece of the coal seam, starting a fire that never fully died out. Another theory suggests spontaneous combustion deep underground. The coal here is laced with minerals like iron pyrite.
All right, here we go. Listen to this very carefully. Let's jump back here. They're trying to figure out, how did this happen? How did this mountain start to burn? How did this coal seam catch on fire? Here we go.
There's spontaneous combustion deep underground. The coal here is laced with minerals like iron pyrite, also known as fool's gold, which can oxidize and produce heat. Perhaps in a dry spell, the seam slowly heated itself to the point of ignition. With oxygen seeping in from the cracks at the surface, a slow burn could have taken hold. Whatever the spark, by the time the Wanarua people knew this place as Wingen, the underworld fire was already alive.
Well, I don't know if they're going to mention it, or I didn't hear them mention it. These all turned into literal bricks, of clay bricks, because of the dehydration. Now, the other thing that happened is a ton of sulfur came out of there. All this is all sulfurous fumes. What's creating the sulfur? Why is it sulfurous? And why has it burned for so long?
A hot ember buried in the earth, quietly feeding on the coal of the mountain. Once lit, the fire would have smouldered steadily onward. This is not a raging inferno with towering flames, but a subterranean ember that creeps through the coal seam. There were likely times it dwindled, starved of air or fuel, and times it surged when conditions.
Let me mention to you once again, inside of the veins, they're littered with little channels that would allow oxygen to flow in. Veins are not solid tubes. They have all kinds of porous things where the capillaries attach to the veins and dump their contents. So that's what's feeding, I believe, through those vein porous channels. Let me show you what a vein looks like, a real vein, a true vein attached to capillaries. All right, here we go, back to Oz geology. Now, I'm saying that these arteries, veins, have porosity to them. And that allows the oxygen to just barely come into here. And it would smolder really forever. These veins will never turn off because they have holes and porosity in them. And I'm going to show you that right now. Okay, this is a new technique of photography of veins, arteries, capillaries, lymphatic system, and what a vein actually looks like when it's transporting its contents back to be recycled. These are arteries, the big ones. They feed off into little blood vessels. They feed off into capillaries, and the capillaries dump their contents into the vein, which is not just a straight tube. Every one of those little spots is an entryway. So if it's all dried out, you would have all those little tiny tubes going in there where it could suck air, but very, very slowly. These things are very, very restrictive. And I will show you that in much deeper detail in a much more close shot. This is not normally something doctors are able to see. This is a new technique to see these things. Well, it's a new way to look at it. Let's put it this way. Okay, I want you to look at this carefully. Just take your time. As I showed you before, the black vein, which is coal, has these feeders, which are the capillaries. And what a capillary does is it clamps off the blood flow to a point where there's no really red blood cells to speak of. There's no more nutrients. Let's just go with that. There's no more nutrients in the blood. It's been dispersed to all the different cells. But it has to dump what's left over into a vein. And it can't dump it one little tiny spot somewhere in the body. It has to continuously dump it from everywhere that surrounds it. You see, as it comes down all around here, these are all blood vessels dumping their contents into the vein. Now, all of these little tiny lines are the lymphatic system. That pulls back fluid from the vein, and it pulls it back into the lymphatic system. And as I understand it, there's 4 times as much of this fluid in your body, in these little tiny tubes, as there is blood in your body. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what is claimed by experts. So this, as you can easily see, is certainly not a solid tube that cannot be penetrated. It is always penetrated, and it has to be able to be penetrated to pick up all this stuff. This is like garbage, and it's going back in one direction or the other. Now, there'll be a clamp here or there, and I think this might be one here. That I really can't tell you. But in veins, there are clamps. Like this right here might be something, where it goes up, and and you can see those in the veins of coal. They have the same thing, but that's all the capillaries feeding down from the arteries. And I know what the structural material is that has those veins in it, and it's muscle. What we're looking at there was, I'm almost certain, is muscle, and I'll show you why, and I'll tell you why the sulfur is being emitted from that combustion. And a combustion happens because the air can flow through these little tiny tubes, as you saw, which through that vein, and once it combusted, it just barely sucks out the tiniest little bits of air to keep it going. That's why it just barely moves. I think it moves like a meter a year or something. It's just barely burning, but it will never stop. As long as you can get some more oxygen. Oxygen's the key to combustion. You don't get oxygen, you're done. That's why they're all, and you know the crazy thing? I still can't figure out why, to be perfectly honest with you. You spray water on top of something that burns, and it puts it out. This guy, it's driven me crazy, because H2O hydrogen is one of the most combustible things on the planet, and you need oxygen to make it explode. And when you have H2 and then O2 together, instead of just H2O, if you have 2 oxygens along with 2 hydrogens, it explodes like a gigantic atomic bomb. But if you just have H2, 1 oxygen, and you put that on something burning, it puts it out. You understand what I'm saying? The only difference between water and a gigantic explosion of gases is 2 hydrogens and 2 oxygens together makes a bomb. 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen together makes water that puts the bomb out. The only difference is the extra oxygen. And once you remove the oxygen, it turns these into a liquid, water, H2O. When you have H2O2, you have mixing gases. And that's when it explodes. It's kind of strange. But anyway, we get into chemistry. Now, why are we getting sulfur coming out of those fissures? All right, they just did a big study on Yellowstone. Here it is right there. They found basaltic melt, rhyolithic melt, transition between the two, and a hydrothermal system. Here it is right here. These are the basaltic melt. That's a product of collagens, which is a rubbery stuff, and under pressure. And it melts into this basaltic melt. Then you got the rhyolithic melt, which is up here, which is more of a structural stuff. And here, I believe this is from the bloody tissues. This could be a lot more bloody too. And then you've got these coming off to the sides, and then up here is your caldera, where all of that heat transfers up. As long as this doesn't get pressurized too much, and that bubbling can come out of there, and it's coming out pretty good now. And they were worried about it, so that's why they did this study. But these are the lungs. That's the trachea and the throat and esophagus, and coming up to where it bubbles off. And there's these little things coming on the side. These are probably the heart and the liver right up in this area. All of that stuff where there's a lot of blood and mushy soft tissue can turn into, magma, because it's combusting underneath the earth in the pressurization as it decomposes. And the more it decomposes, which means the more heat, and even under the earth, it's pretty cold, no matter where you are on earth if you get down far enough. But now it's absorbing it. The more it absorbs, every degree is a huge amount of decomposition, and then you get these things expanding, and they're going to explode. And this to show you what the human body looks like. You got your lungs here, which is the two big jobbers coming down, and then this is your heart and so forth is right in this area. Your liver is right in here, your stomach, your heart, and then it comes up to where the caldera is. And here's what it looks like in a little other way. And remember those two little things sticking off to the sides? Anything with a lot of blood in it, they're showing here. A lot of blood. The lungs are in here. The tube coming up. It's basically identical to what is underneath Yellowstone. And basalt, I know from my own Mudfossil, I know basalt quite frequently is the product of things that have a lot of collagen. A lot of collagen, so they can rub and scrub and pull, and your lungs have to do this all day long. That's why this is basaltic melt. This is more structural. This is not the same, and this won't be the same either, because I think these are the heart and some other organ in there. So right now I'm focusing in on these, and a lot of the heart muscle, which has to do this all day long, and these have to do that all day long, and other things don't do that ever. They're just supposed to be solid. Totally different makeup of collagens and keragens. There's like 20 of each, I think, somewhere around there. I think maybe even more now. And each one of them has a job. Some of them are flexible, some of them are stiff, some of them are all kinds of different things. Some of them have to work with acids, some have to work with salts, some of them have to work with porosity. And I mean, it's staggering, the capability of the human body to adapt to whatever it needs to have. Truly stunning when you really get working with this stuff. And here's the caldera at the top. These are people walking around. This is all bubbling off. As long as the heat can get out, you don't get that pressurization. It's just like you got to take the cap off of a soda bottle and you shake it around a little bit, it just bubbles off. You know what I'm talking about. They can explode if you get enough expansion. It's just in nature. So we did this. Now, why am I bringing all this about? Is because of Mount Spur, which is right up here. And these are all volcanoes. Look at that. And these are very active. Rumbly sort of active. Now, could this whole thing go off at once if it built up enough pressure? One of them, I think it was right out here, I can't remember, it was Atka or something like that, just popped a couple days ago, a week ago, or whatever. And I'd like to know what the types of gas that are being emitted, because I can tell, well, I don't know if that would be helpful or not, but it would be interesting. So let's take a look close at Spur. Okay, now comes the fun part. For me, this is the fun part, proving my claims. The structure I will show you are muscle sarcomeres, little pinchy blocks. These are the phosphate layers that are between each one of these blocks of sarcomeres. Why would the phosphate layer contribute to sulfur? The phosphate layer is between every membrane in your body. There's a phospholipid, which is two layers actually of phosphorus with fatty stuff in between. Heat causes phosphorus to change up to sulfur. You say, oh, how could that be? It's because it forces extra particles into the phosphorus, and then the phosphorus jumps up into sulfur and is emitted as a gas. Let me show you how that chemistry works. Again, this is very simple. A 10-year-old should easily be able to understand what I'm going to show you. People think this phosphorus is just one thing. It's just a chunk of phosphorus and every other chunk is the same. It's not. Phosphorus ranges in size to stability. Stability is way in the middle, and you go way unstable to the low side and way unstable to the high side. They either want to give some off or take some on to get to the middle, which is stability. Let me show you that right now. Very, very simple. Don't freak out on me. All right, I'm going to make this simple because it is simple. All right, phospholipids are a key component of all cell membranes. All that means, very simple, is that the P, phosphorus, is in that layer. And it forms the head right here. That little thing is like phosphorus, and this is like phosphorus, and in between is like a jelly stuff. And that's your membrane that wraps around all your organs and everything. So it's a key component. Look at this. Phospholipid, that stuff, the phosphorus, key component of all cell membranes, even down to the red blood cells and everything else. So it's everywhere. Its phosphate group is everywhere in your body, just your saturated phosphates, as I am, I hope. So what does that mean? It means if you heated that phosphate, those phosphorus particles, hot enough, they turn into sulfur. And he's, oh, come on, Roger. Well, let's see. Let's see what they have to say about isotopes. These are the things that I don't think are well understood. Isotopes, you have to understand dipole electron flood theory to understand isotopes, and they don't understand dipole electron flood theory. Therefore, isotopes are not understood. All right, this, again, very simple. Don't freak out on me. Right at the moment, a proton is considered an elementary sort of particle that makes up virtually everything. And they have neutrons, they call them. Well, so they're saying that they have a particle like this, which is called an atom, and these are, let's say, quarks. They say there's like 3 entangled quarks, and they can smash these to bits, and they'll come out with a ton of just particles. Well, what they actually have is a ball like this. Every one of these dots is a little magnet, which it is. All right, and these are all dipoles. Now, in an atom, the dark parts of the dipole go right to the center, crusted by the white energetic particles. That's why they bounce, because they're energetic, and they surround the dark particles until they get stable at a certain stability. Now, if you took some away, that means you have an isotope. An isotope means you just don't have enough particles to make it stable. It wants more. It takes on a couple more. It gets a little more stable, a little more stable, a little more stable. And then all of a sudden it gets the right amount, and it says, I don't want any more, and I don't want to give any up. That's called stability. What if you force a whole batch more of these particles in here? So, whoa, 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 you can't do that. Stay away, stay away. So, like hell, I'm coming in. And they just keep coming in, all of a sudden it goes bloop, and it turns into a sulfur. Guess what? Proven. I'm going to make you an atomic physicist right now, and it's just in 10 minutes, you'll be as smart as any of them on the face of the planet. Because These are isotopes of phosphorus. I showed you those are the phospholipid layers. Those are phosphorus layers. Well, if you heat them, they change and they jump up to sulfur. That's why the sulfur emissions in a gaseous form. Now, it says, although phosphorus has 22 isotopes, that's the only ones they know about, and it actually has thousands, but that's okay. They say there's 22 isotopes that they have identified. Only 31P is stable. 31 means it's atomic mass, basically. 31P is stable. The other ones are not stable. What does it mean not to be stable? What does that mean? You have to understand a couple of things here. Very simple. Again, very simple. It's just making something colder or making something hotter. That's all. If you make it hotter, it changes states. And what does it change to? Well, I'm glad you asked. Okay, I showed you the phosphorus is the layers of the membranes. If you heat those up or get those colder, they will change from being stable. At 31, they will go down and become silicon, magnesium, aluminum, all that stuff. Or it will go up from stable and become sulfur. Well, why would it go up? It goes up because you force more particles in. It says, I can't take that. And it says, well, just go turn yourself into sulfur. It's okay. And it takes on a few more extra particles and bloop, it becomes a sulfur, which is the next one up from phosphorus, which is the membranes. Sulfur is the next one up. So what we did was we took phosphorus, which is your membranes, and then we cooked the hell out of it and forced it to pump itself up into sulfur and give itself off as a gas. That's what's coming out of the volcanoes. And that's why they say, well, volcanoes, anything that burns phosphorus. And phosphorus is basically coats all the membranes in the body. So when they burn, they give off sulfur. And I mean a lot of it. Look at this. All these different states are still phosphorus, but they turn into sulfur just by adding an extra electron. Look at them. All these are all still phosphorus. And this is the decay mode. So they can decay upwards, obviously, into sulfur, or they can decay downwards into aluminum and silicon. And that did happen in the Great Flood. This phosphorus going up to silicon is from the heat of fire. This phosphorus going down to aluminum silicates, which created the feldspar. Everything's coated with feldspar. Even my buddy here, Caesar, his feathers and everything, because that's collagen, basically. Collagen is in the floppy membranes. That's what membranes are. So this proves everything. I mean, there's no question. It's just proven 100% certainty. Phosphorus bumps up the sulfur, which is the gases coming out from burning phosphorus. And phosphorus decayed down to aluminum silicates, which is the surrounding of the fascia-facilitated fossilization of all my mud fossils. And it's just... It's completely proven now, as far as I'm concerned. If anything that proved me not, I'd like to see that. I have made my proof, and I have DNA tests and CAT scans and everything else on my specimens. And refusal to see that means I win, and I'm correct. If you won't re-engage, you're not an expert. You're not a scientist. You're not allowed to speak if you won't speak to evidence. You shouldn't be speaking. I should be the one speaking, not you. I shouldn't be the one quieted. I should be the one that's allowed to say, here's my evidence. Let's talk. So I'm doing it. And I think I'm showing, everything I'm showing is biology transitioning in a number of ways. But anyway, the aluminum silicates are dropping down from stable, and the sulfur is going up from stable because of being forced in. The other ones, they boiled out, basically. They boiled out a lot of the stability because there was stuff to take it away. When you're forcing particles in, there's nothing to take it away. It has to come up to sulfur. When you're boiling something out and you're mixing the stuff and it comes out, you end up dropping down a little bit. And that's what happened in the Great Flood. This is just, it really started with spontaneous combustion. I agree with that. Because it's just biology that's been sequestered and it's close enough to the top of the earth that it can absorb a little bit of oxygen through those vascular networks, which are from the veins, vascular veins. They go right in there because there's all those little tubes that I showed you, which are they were normally the capillaries, but once the thing died, they became places where they could suck air in. All right. And here's your little capillaries that are running out. And when they're close enough to the surface, they can get air enough to combust. But they have to be covered and just being able to take in enough, and at some point they pop inside, and then it just continues to fester. And this is only moving just a few meters a year. The way this whole thing is progressing. That's what a vein is. And this is an actual vein, and these are actual blood vessels, which are, in this case, capillaries, leading back to the blood vessels. And this is actually the lymphatic system. And that's how they invade the vein. I think that's pretty clear. All right, well, let me just explain to you one last thing, or a couple of little last things before we go here. This is also from Australia. These are organs, and in this case, it's a heart. And it's completely taken over by transition metals, which are the things that are in your blood. And there was just so much blood in here, it was just like in a puddle of blood, and it stabilized the tissues with certain transition metals because they have polarity, they have charges on them. It's a very simple thing to understand. Here's what they are. Again, don't freak out on me. People say, oh, no, just think about it. It's very simple. You got titanium. You got vanadium, great. These are all metal. And they're in your blood. These are aqueous solution metals. And you have a core, which is this. And vanadium can have all these different charges. What does that mean? You got vanadium here. And if it has a +2 charge, a chunk is missing here. If it has a +3 charge, a chunk is missing there. If it has a 4, whatever. Now, whatever that charge is, it says, I'll hook up with you if you got an extra 2 or 3, and I'll hook up with you if you got 4 or 5, and I'll hook up with you if you got whatever. And then they hook up around the metal core, and this goes through the aqueous solutions, and they charge onto the metal ions. The number and groups of atoms, they're called ligands. They're the ligands that attach. And in the aqueous solution, the ions, which means they're not full particles, form complexes with colors. And different colors depends on what metals they have attached, because those bounce back at different frequencies, because they're literally different hard. They're harder or softer, almost. You can think of it that way. They have extra electrons. They give it a puffy thing, or they have less electrons that give it a more of an attractive thing. One of them bounces, one of them attracts. It's just more or less. It's not that hard to understand. And when they're working together, you have this, and then another chunk of them comes over and says, okay, me and you will work together. And it goes through the body. And then it hits a spot and it says, hey, I need that. And it says, well, what do you got to offer? And it says, well, here, I give you 3 of these, you give me 2 of those. It's okay, thank you. And it goes back and it gets to the vein, and it says, hey, there's that garbage the guy gave me down on level 7, and it throws it in the vein. And then it just keeps going around and around and around. Now, and these are what do the actual chemistry in your body. You don't have those metals, you're in trouble. And the main one, obviously, is iron. These are O2 and 3 states of iron. Basically, is the used blood and the oxygenated blood. You have an extra oxygen. It drags it through your body, and your body just sucks it up like crazy. You need so much oxygen. You know you die in a 4 or 5 minutes if somebody strangles you. It's that you need oxygen continuously. The amount of work your blood does in your body, you just can't even imagine. Absolutely phenomenal. When I started to look how much blood can pump in your body, it's like when you're really active, you can go up to like 6 gallons a minute. That's just incredible. 6 gallons a minute. I don't know if they'll come out of my faucet in my house that much. I don't think so. I don't have the best water pressure, but still. I mean, it's just phenomenal what your body is capable. But you have to have the things to give me that, you give me 2 of these, I'll give you 6 of those, have a nice day, see you later, I'll be back in a couple of minutes. Unbelievable. Okay, my friends, here it is right here. Johns Hopkins University researchers, including Dr. Livy, have contributed to solving the century-old mystery of Antarctica's blood falls by identifying iron-rich nanospheres. Well, what's a nanosphere? It means a very, very tiny little sphere. They are the cause of its vibrant red color rather than minerals, as previously thought. So, what is a nanosphere? And it's iron rich. Why would that be? I think it might be blood cells. Well, we know they're iron rich because it says, yes, red blood cells are iron rich, and we always trust AI. Okay, $1 million question. Is Spur going to pop or is it going to settle down? This will be the Alaska Volcano Observatory. Matt Haney's going to be speaking, and I would like to speak with him and have sort of communicated a bit, but I think he probably thinks I'm crazy. Now, listen to what he has to say.
Mount Spur, it's the volcano in Alaska that's closest to Anchorage. We've been observing signs of unrest at Mount Spur. So it began about April of last year. Those signs of unrest are indicating that there has been a magma intrusion beneath the volcano.
All right, the colors of the pool in here change and the gaseous emissions change. Those are what I'd like to know about, first of all.
It's uncertain whether this unrest will lead to an eruption. We discussed at the Volcano Observatory last week extensively, and we put the odds of this unrest at the volcano leading to an eruption at about 50%, or equally likely to the unrest not leading to an eruption. We have 11 seismic stations remote that operate on the slopes of the volcano, and we're looking for a signal that we call volcanic tremor, which is unlike little earthquakes we've been measuring, lately every day, up to hundreds of little earthquakes. It's more of just a continuous shaking of the ground that can go on for minutes or 10 minutes or even longer. So if we were to see volcanic tremor, then that would be a clear indication that the unrest is progressing further.
Okay, that's what we're looking at. Will it erupt or won't it? And there's 2 systems going on here. There's Spur and this way, and there's the Aleutian Islands and that way. That's what we're going to see shortly. Okay, during all this shaking and so forth up at Spur, Atka volcano just erupted just a few days ago. So I think this whole tube may be pressurized. All right, this is the Aleutian chain. Every one of these is an active volcano, active right now. And that Atka is somewhere out in here. They're all over the place, a zillion of them.